Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this great big world of ours. Thanks for attending our webinar. My name is Wally Mead. I'm a Principal Program Manager and Product Owner with Cybersyn. I've been with Cybersyn about 2 years now after spending 22 years at Microsoft in the Configuration Manager product group. So I was there from the very beginning of Systems Management Server 1.0 all the way up through to Configuration Manager 2012 before I left to come to Cybersyn. My contact details are on the slide, as well as our team at cybersyn.com alias and the website if you need to contact us. So the topic of today's webinar is what's new in System Center Configuration Manager. So what I want to do is basically show you or hopefully give you some reasons why you might want to consider moving to this latest release of Configuration Manager from the Microsoft Product Group. So with that, let's go ahead and jump on in and see what we got to cover for you. So first off, I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about who we are as a company at Cybersyn, and then I'm going to jump into the meat of the presentation, which will be covering the feature areas of updates of System Center Configuration Manager that I think are high of interest to you, basically answering the question, why would I want to upgrade or migrate to this newest release of Configuration Manager? I'll talk for a little bit about how Configuration Manager is going to keep itself up to date. This new product has a new servicing model in it that changes how you install new updates for Configuration Manager. So I'll explain that as much as I can for you in the time we have. And then I'll take just a moment to talk about how you can move to this new version of Configuration Manager, whether you do an upgrade or a migration. I'm not going to delve on this at all because this is the topic for Thursday's webinar that we have, same time, same place, just a different webinar, and that's moving to System Center Configuration Manager. So I'll cover the details there, but I'll just give you a little teaser in this presentation. All right, Cybersyn, who are we? So we are a company that's built around System Center. We like to think of ourselves as the experts in System Center, and we help provide service and asset management technologies and resources for you to help you standardize, automate, and transform your environments to be able to take full advantage of the System Center platform. There are 5 pillars that Cybersyn is built around. The first 3 pillars or circles that you see on the slide are product areas around service management, asset management, and identity management. And I'll cover those a little bit later on in the presentation, a couple more slides, but in essence, getting you technologies around Service Manager and Configuration Manager and password resets. The 4th pillar is on our consulting services. So we have a large consulting practice that can help you implement System Center technologies as necessary, but primarily concentrating on our technologies, being our streams or the first 3 pillars that you see here and how we can implement those and help you with those aspects. Now the 5th pillar is our partner and community enablement team, or the PACE team, which is the team I'm actually on. And we are a team of people that go around the world presenting at events, user groups, conferences, working in the community, helping educate people and get them up to speed on the Cybersyn technologies, as well as just general System Center products to help just educate and get people to take better advantage and fuller advantage of the investments they've made in System Center. The Cybersyn Platform, which is the baseline of what we work with, I'll build this out for us. You can see we're sitting at the top of the stack, and on top of that we have is where the Cybersyn technologies and platforms and applications sit. We're sitting on top of System Center. The vast majority of these Cybersyn products revolve around or rely on System Center. There's one that does not, and that's the password reset application. And then from there, System Center, as you know, can be in an on-premise implementation through Hyper-V or physical servers, or it can be in a cloud environment with Azure or other hosted scenarios. It doesn't matter to us product-wise whether you're on-premise or a cloud-based solution. We think there's benefits to being in a cloud-based solution for just the number of reasons that Azure is better than Hyper-V or on-premises, just for maintainability and the cost and so on of that environment, but you get to choose whatever is appropriate for your environment. And then the Cybersyn technologies. So we have something called the Business Management Solution, which is a suite of streams, as we call them. The third stream you see there, Essentials Management, has some of the initial apps that Cybersyn had created, and those are apps that will help extend the Microsoft Service Manager product and its consoles with some cool things to help the analysts and the administrators. On the far left is the Service Management stream, which again, it helps extend Service Manager, but more related now to end users and analysts with the Cybersyn portal, which is a HTML5 based browser-based, it's browser agnostic and device and operating system platform unaware, so it'll work on any of those anywhere. So it just helps provide a better user interface and experience for your end users and analysts when working with Service Manager, and some other apps in there as well. And then Asset Management, which is one I did a 5-part webinar series on last year, and covering how you can take Configuration Manager data, pull it out, put it into a CMDB through asset management, and then extend that data with financial, contractual, business, technical, location, etc. type data to help really provide information around the licenses you have for your software, the contracts you have for your hardware, the software that's running on those hardware assets, and just providing better lifecycle management of your hardware and software assets. Password Reset is right now the one app inside the identity management stream. And this is a product that we came out with last year to help alleviate the help desk requirements for supporting end users when they have a need to reset their password. So now with the Password Reset application, it will integrate with Active Directory and allow end users to reset their passwords on their own without having to integrate with the help desk and bother them when they have other needs to take care of. Another stream, the 5th one we have on the list that is coming soon, is a service automation stream to help you automate some of those redundant tasks that you have to do on a day-to-day basis through connectors to other different platforms. And then lastly, free community apps. And that's where I like to play a lot, because there's a great app in there called the Cybersyn Remote Manage app, which is fantastic for configuration manager environments. It allows your help desk people to support their end users and clients without having to have access to the configuration manager console, but still providing the capabilities that they would do primarily in the console, plus some additional capabilities you can't do inside the config man console. So a great, great tool. And if you aren't familiar with it, I actually did a webinar over a year ago on the Remote Manage app. You might want to go view the recording of that webinar. This webinar, as well as the Remote Manage and all of our webinars, are up on our Vimeo channel. So you'll go to vimeo.com/Team Cybersyn, and you'll be able to find all the different webinars that Cybersyn has delivered, including all the numbers that I've come up with. All right, so now let's jump into the content. So first thing, let's get the name of the product correct. You guys might have heard this being referred to as System Center Configuration Manager 2016, which is an incorrect, invalid product name. There is no Configuration Manager 2016. The official name of the product is simply System Center Configuration Manager. That's the official product name. No 2016, no other date or label or version behind it, just the product name. Now, because of the fact that that could be a little bit confusing, since there's a Configuration Manager 2007 and a Configuration Manager 2012 with various different releases there, and now just Configuration Manager, you're starting to see a lot of references to the phrase current branch being referred to with Configuration Manager. So sometimes you'll see people say Configuration Manager current branch. I've even seen people do Configuration Manager CB, initials for current branch after it. Some people are throwing the version number in there, which currently is version 1511. That's what I'll be demonstrating for you today. So they might say Configuration Manager current branch 1511 after the product name. But again, the version is going to be changing fairly soon. So it'll be becoming a different version with the new self-updating process that Configuration Manager is going through that I'll talk about. So what all this means to you is you need to be very careful as you're talking to people, whether you're on the forums, trying to get support, asking questions, or trying to provide support, or talking to Microsoft product support or consultants or whoever. You have to be very specific about the product that you're working with. So you probably want to say Configuration Manager current branch, or I'll probably be referring to it in this webinar as vNext. vNext was the code name for this product in its pre-release stages that I've been playing with for quite a while. So just be aware of that. It will make it a little more challenging for you, but you'll be able to get it going. And again, the last bullet, it'll receive updates frequently, and I'll talk about that in the second section of this presentation. All right, so first thing we want to talk about is Windows 10 support. There's a lot of cool things in the Configuration Manager product that help you with your Windows 10 support. And you might be thinking to yourself, hey, I've got Configuration Manager 2007, and I'm happily managing Windows 10 clients along with my Windows 7 clients out there. And that's true. You might be a ConfigMan 2012 customer and say, I've done some playing around with Windows 10 in my ConfigMan 2012 environment, including OSD, and it works great. And that is absolutely true as well. There's just some limitations in what you can perform in both those two older platforms over what you can perform now with the new Configuration Manager product. It's got full support, which is what I'll talk about in this little section for you. So first off, full client capabilities. What that means is anything you could do with Configuration Manager to a Windows 7 client or Windows 8, Windows 8.1. I have Windows XP on the slide. It's no longer in support and not supported by the new Configuration Manager, but I have it there just because that's the frame of reference for most people. Any of those ConfigMan client features, software distribution, inventory, software updates, compliance settings, operating system deployment, etc. All those things work on a Windows 10 client just as well as they did on any of the other platforms that you would have in place now or used to have in place, like Windows XP. One of the cool things is that next sub-bullet is that if you're a endpoint protection customer, you know that when you enable endpoint protection in Configuration Manager, it installs a new agent on your client, the System Center Endpoint Protection Client Agent. Well, with Windows 10, it doesn't install a new agent on the client. It actually just uses the Windows Defender that's built into the Windows 10 operating system. It's managed like endpoint protection and through endpoint protection. So you would go and still create your endpoint protection anti-malware policies and configure your settings and so on, and those would be pushed down to your Windows 10 just like your other clients. It would just be implementing those settings in Windows Defender as opposed to installing that extra agent for endpoint protection. So that's pretty cool. Software distribution support, you have Windows 10 as a supported platform for application deployment types as well as package and programs. So great, you have that in the other two versions of Configuration Manager as well, just obviously there now. Support for Windows Business Store and side loading applications. What that means is you can install apps through a store, Microsoft Store, the Windows Business Store, or you can create your own apps and deploy them through distribution points as you have traditionally done. And then there's some additional mobile device features that I'll talk about later on in this presentation. We talk about mobile device management support. Next area is operating system deployment. So you have full capabilities of all operating system deployment functions. So all the normal deployment methods you've used in the past for OSD, bare metal, break fix, wipe and load, and so on, all those are still there. Plus, you now have in-product support for performing in-place upgrades from Windows 7 and later to Windows 10. And that's Microsoft's recommended method to get to Windows 10 from a Windows 7 and later platform is doing an in-place upgrade. Now, you had that slight capability or similar capability in ConfigMan 2012, but it wasn't native in the box. You had to go and download some additional code from Microsoft to provide that task sequence support. And as you'll see in the demo coming up momentarily, this is native in the product. So very, very cool. Then once you get Windows 10 deployed in your infrastructure, as you know, Windows 10 is to be going through a new servicing model as well, where it's going to get new versions of Windows 10. It went from 1507 to 1511. There'll be a new version coming out this year, or at least one. And those will be more of an automated installation deployment type scenario. With that, you're going to go ahead and be able to manage those servicing rings and servicing plans with Configuration Manager. You'll have in-console monitoring that will show you the number of Windows 10 clients you have in those different builds, 1507, 1511, long-term servicing branch, as well as the ability of creating servicing plans to control the deployment of new Windows 10 builds out to clients in specific collections. So very cool capabilities to help you monitor and manage your upgrades to Windows 10 and keeping them up to date going forward. So let's jump over to the demo environment and take a look and see what that looks like. So here's our configuration manager environment. Let me go to full screen mode. The nice thing is that if you look here, it looks very similar to what you have today. Now, if you're still on ConfigMan 2007, it might not look quite as similar because you know there was quite a big change in the console from ConfigMan 2007 to ConfigMan 2012. But from ConfigMan 2012 just to Configuration Manager, the console is the same. Now, there'll be some new nodes added here and there, but for the most part, it's the same console. So very, very easy transition for you. As we zoom in on the Help About, you see the product name is Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager, and the current build or version is 1511. So that's the RTM of the product that came out in December of 2015. And you can see the build number is 8325, where you might be on like 8239 or 7958, different versions of the ConfigMan 2012 R2 platform. So with that, let's jump and look at some of the Windows 10 stuff. So if we go to Software Library, we go to Application Management, go to an application. I have an app here. If I go to its properties, you'll see normal properties. I'll go to deployment types. I have one. I'll edit that deployment type. I'll go to the requirements tab. I don't have any requirements, so I'll go ahead and create a requirement here quickly. And I'll stay on the device category and I'll go to operating system. And now if you look in operating system, you'll see that Windows 10 is a platform. So I can go ahead and select that, indicating that Windows 10, either 64-bit or 32-bit, would be an appropriate or required version of the product for this application deployment type. Or if I don't select it and select others, then obviously it would not be applicable. And as you can see, there's Windows XP and Windows Vista listed there, not technically supported. Well, Vista is, but we know not that many people use it, so realistically it's Windows 7 and above. You have the same capabilities for packages and programs on the requirements tab there to be able to set the required platforms for the program for that package. All right, so you can manage. Let's go ahead and look at deployment. So let's go down to operating systems and let's go down to task sequences. And if I go up to create a task sequence, this is a dialog you've seen before, and most of you guys are probably doing this task sequence option, install an existing image package. This fourth one is a new one that's been added for Configuration Manager, upgrade an operating system from an upgrade package. This is the new one, and this is the in-place upgrade task sequence action. So both of these, or all these, are to walk you through a wizard, answering appropriate questions, and it will create a task sequence for you. I walk through the wizard for both the install an existing image package and the upgrade an operating system from upgrade package actions. And what got created were these two task sequences in the back. So if I go and look at the install Windows 10 and edit that task sequence, here's a normal task sequence that you might be familiar with for installation of an operating system. You might have modified it, so you may have more steps, you may have fewer steps in your excuse me, in your task sequence, but it's roughly familiar to you. Now, if I go with the one I created with the upgrade an operating system, and now let's pull the other one back in here to view, and we'll do a side-by-side comparison. You can see that the upgrade in an existing operating system task sequence is much smaller, much simpler. You got 3 actions there. So very, very short compared to the dozen actions or so that's in the bare metal type deployment task sequence that was on the left. So you have check readiness for upgrade. So we're going to verify that the client has enough memory, has enough processor, is a proper operating system, like a client-based operating system, before we image it. And that's this option here. And you could add that to a normal task sequence if you wanted to. Then there's a built-in command to upgrade the operating system. very long command line it's going to run, very, very easy. And then 1 to restart the computer. That's it. 3 things versus that dozen things that you're going to run over there. So much easier, much faster. And here just be the check readiness for upgrade. You're seeing we're looking for memory, we're looking for processor speed, and by the way, verifying that it's a client-based operating system so that you're not re-imaging your Exchange servers with a Windows 10 image, which people have done. So that's very cool. Makes it nice and easy and quick and efficient for you to go ahead and upgrade your operating systems to Windows 10. So very cool. Now you've got Windows 10 deployed, you're managing it, and now you see this new node in the console, Windows 10 servicing. Let's go ahead and click on that. And this node will show you how many clients you have in various builds of Windows 10. And here you can see that 100% of my clients, which is 1, is running Windows 10 version 15.11. But if you still had some 15.07s out there, if you had some long-term servicing branch releases out there, you'd have different sections of this donut, and as you hovered over any of them, the appropriate donut would kind of expand out and you get the details for that build or version of Windows 10 that you had out there. So kind of cool, quick, easy way to see what your population looks like. Servicing rings, it shows me right now that I have 1 release ready build of Windows 10. So it's 100% of my population. I don't have any current branch for business or long-term servicing branch releases. Off to the right-hand side, I'm allowed to create a servicing plan, which I'll show you in a second. But more appropriately, it's going to tell me if I have any Windows 10 builds that are expiring soon or have already expired and are out of product support. And I'll show you how where that information comes from in just a second. Down in the middle here, I have the ability of creating servicing plans. So I have 2 servicing plans I created. This one says current branch to pilot. So I'm saying day 0 of a new release, I want to go ahead and release that new version of Windows 10 to my pilot collection immediately. And then I have another servicing plan which says release the current branch version to my production environment, different collection, but do so plus 30 days. So give me 30 days of validation with my pilot group before I move to production. And you can create multiple different servicing plans here for current branch for business, and so on, with different time frames on when you want the automatic deployment to happen. Very, very easy to create these. You could click right up here and hit create servicing plan. Once you've created one, just give it a name, target collection, your deployment package, and then the ring you want to go to, current branch for business. And then you can set advanced options and settings, which you bring the full wizard up, which you can launch through a different place in the console as well when you do a create servicing plan. And then that will give you your scheduling and let you use the slider to see what your time frame is on that deployment. Then down at the very bottom is kind of the Windows 10 life cycle. And it shows you in the upper left your legend as of October of last year. Green was release ready, blue was business ready, and red was near end of life. So you see that if you had any 15.07 Windows 10 devices, they're getting near end of life. As of March of this year, they're going to be hitting that near end of life time frame. If you have any 15.11s, they're release ready and they've got lifespan yet. In essence, you have a year to update any build of Windows 10 you have out there. And then I don't have any long-term servicing branch in my environment, but obviously it is a long-term environment. So this information down at the bottom is going to come from Microsoft, and it will be updated periodically as information changes, as new builds come out, as timeline changes. You'll be nearing expiration, or you will have expired a build, and so this data will come down to that new updates and servicing feature that I'll talk about here just momentarily. So this will be dynamic information that will get updated to the console as necessary, and then this will just show you what your current status is on your Windows 10 environments. So very good capabilities for you to help deploy and manage and monitor your implementations of Windows 10. Okay, next area is something I just mentioned, which is the updates and servicing feature. And I mentioned that for that Windows 10 life cycle data. So this is a new servicing capabilities, and in Configuration Manager to help keep Configuration Manager up to date. So think about this as a replacement for cumulative updates and service packs, which are kind of at times difficult for you to get implemented because of the fact you have to go in and discover that a new release is out, download that release manually, get it brought over to your environment, extract out that binary or that cab that you download, get everything updated, ready to roll, work with your change board and the schedule when you want to do your update and so on. So what this feature would do in a perfect world is every day your site is going to connect up to Microsoft and upload some information up to Microsoft saying, this is who I am, here's what version of Configuration Manager I'm running. Are there any updates for me appropriately for my version of Configuration Manager? If so, it'll go ahead and download those updates automatically. So they'll get downloaded automatically to your site infrastructure. They'll get extracted and prepared automatically. So you didn't have to do any discovery at all. It just happened automatically. Nothing got installed, just download and prepare the bits. Then those bits will go ahead and appear in the console when they're available for you to install. And I'll show you that information here just momentarily. Once you've decided you want to install, you walk through a wizard, answer a few questions, and bingo, it's off doing its installation of that new build of Configuration Manager. Now, some of these update packs, as they're called, might have new features in them, and you may not want to utilize those new features right away because maybe you have to do some training of your staff first before you decide you want to turn on that feature. Well, you can choose not to enable those features and instead just install the updates that would be in that update pack, like you would have cumulative updates from the past. There's in-console monitoring that will help you track the update progress. So very easy process of discovering. You just see it in the console. It's ready to roll. You just run a wizard to install, let it go off on its own. And I'll show you what that looks like momentarily. There also is a specific maintenance window that you can configure to control when you want your site infrastructure to get updated. So you might kick it off now, but you may have put in a specific servicing maintenance window, so it won't run until midnight tonight, for example. Now, as part of this, oftentimes when you have had cumulative updates or service packs in the past, there was a new client version. So you would go ahead and do your installation of that service pack or that cumulative update, and it would change your client version. So any new clients you install would have that new client build on it. Your existing clients would have an older build. And then you want to do some testing of that new client. So you would go ahead and create a package and program and deploy that out to a collection of clients and see what happens. All works out well, you expand your collection scope, or you go ahead and turn on automatic client upgrade to get everybody updated and everybody's happy. Well, that was a lot of work for you as well to do that configuration. So the client piloting feature is part of this update and servicing aspect. And this will allow you to test a new client build that comes in these update packs in production on a limited set of clients. So when you walk through the wizard to install that update pack, it's going to ask you if you want to do pre-production testing or you want to just update everybody. So you would designate a pre-production client, which I'll show you what it looks like. That new client version is then deployed to those clients in that pre-production collection automatically. You don't have to do anything. You just told the collection, we update the clients in that collection. You have in-console monitoring to validate that what your status is for production client deployment, as well as pre-production client deployment. When you've done all your production client deployments, everything looks good. It's very, very easy to promote, as the slide says, that pre-production version to a full production client version, so that everybody then would get updated the same version of the client. So let me show you what that looks like. Now, I can't really do a demo because of the fact that I'm running the RTM build or 1511 build of Configuration Manager, and there are no update packs available for it. So what I've done instead is I captured some screenshots of this process from a technical preview site that I have that does have some updates available to it. So here's the first screenshot. So I'm in the new node called the Updates and Servicing node. It's under Cloud Services. And here you can see there's a new build, 1512, that is available. So it got downloaded automatically, got extracted out, Configuration Manager was told it was available. So all I do then is go up to the ribbon and I choose this option for Install Update Pack. So when I choose the Install Update Pack, it launches off the wizard. In this case, it tells me that this update pack has site server updates, console updates, client updates, and bug fixes. So I go ahead and know what's going to be happening in my environment. This one didn't have any features, but if there were any features, a page would pop up and let me see what features were there, and I could clear the checkboxes if I didn't want to enable those features. This one doesn't have any. Here's where it asks if you want to install without validating. This is the traditional method where any new clients get the new build. When you do an auto client upgrade, it gets that new build as well. I went ahead and said, no, I want to do validation in pre-production environment. So let me go ahead and move down a little bit and zoom in. So I said validate in pre-production, and here's the collection of clients I want you to test on. I'll show you what that did in a moment. Here it says it's in a checking prerequisite state. So it's in a state where it is actually deploying it. Run prereq check. There's also another place where you can go in the monitoring workspace. There's a new node here called Site Servicing Status. I can click on that node, and here it tells me the status of my deployment. In this case, it passed a prereq check with warnings. Now I'm going to go ahead and click this option up here called Show Status, which will give me some additional status information as to that update. When I do that, it gives me line-by-line details of all the, in this case, prereq check stuff you see at the bottom half, as well as in this, at the top, it says it's installing a new service called the Configuration Manager Update Service, and that installation was successful. So now the service is there to go ahead and help me actually get my site upgraded. So I let that run. Eventually, it's all done. This case, remember, it said there was a new version of the console. The console message pops up, says, hey, there's a new version of the console, 8336. You're currently running 8325. You should probably upgrade. So I clicked OK. It shut down my console. It installed the new version of the console, brought my console back up for me. So I'm running a proper version of the console. Here I'm in the my monitoring workspace. You see I've expanded client status. You guys are familiar with these two nodes we had before. Now you have production client deployment to see what your status is of, in this case, 8325 clients. And then I have pre-production client deployment. What's my status of 8336, or the new build of client software. And here you can see I've got one client that's in a state of no status, and I got one that's in a state of in progress. Then lastly, that one client that was in progress has completed. So now I've got one client that was not turned on, so we didn't know status from it, and one client that did successfully upgrade. Tells me my collection version off to the far right-hand side, Configuration Manager Workstations, and again tells me the client build here over on the left-hand side. Now, let's say I've done all my testing. This 8336 client version works great. I want to basically make it available to everybody. All I do now is I'm going to go back to my very first screenshot here, is when this state goes from available here to installed, then this action up on the ribbon becomes available. And that action is client update options. All I do is click that button or right click on the update and do client update option. And then there's a checkbox. I click the checkbox, and basically that says make pre-production production. And it just makes all my new clients, or any new clients, the new client version. And if however I want to upgrade my clients, we'll go ahead and deploy that new client build out. So very, very simple, easy process for me to keep my environment up to date and up to status and get new features implemented without having to do that, a lot of that discovery and manual process that we did before. Okay, mobile device management. There are multiple different ways of performing mobile device management. You guys are probably familiar with Microsoft Intune, which is a standalone cloud service that you can use to enroll mobile devices and manage them through the web. There's also the ability of integrating Microsoft Intune with Configuration Manager. So that way you'd have a single console, a single site that was allowing you to manage your on-premise Windows devices, your Macs, your Linux, your Unix, as well as mobile devices that are being managed through Microsoft Intune, all in that single console. And there's another option available I'll talk about in just a minute. Well, that integration scenario between Microsoft Intune and Configuration Manager is called hybrid support. So in a hybrid scenario, what's always happens is that the cloud service gets updated more frequently and quickly than does the integrated service. Because Microsoft owns the cloud service and it's not impacting your infrastructure, it's easy for them to go ahead and make updates. And they generally do about on a monthly basis. So the integrated environment or hybrid is oftentimes behind because Configuration Manager, it takes a while for you guys to update things, so they don't release new updates for that as frequently. So there was this feature called extensions for Microsoft Intune in the console that will let you pull down new updates to implement locally, or you may have to have service packs to pull those features into the hybrid environment. Well, now, as of the release of this product back in December of last year, there was parity between the online service and the integrated environment. Now, obviously, since then, it's been a couple of months, so Microsoft Intune's probably implemented some features that aren't there in ConfigMan yet because there's been no new updates for it. But one of those features has been the implementation of Windows 10 mobile device management support. So the ability of managing Windows 10 mobile devices, whether it's Windows 10 phone, whether it's Surface devices, whether it's laptops, desktops, you can manage them with the built-in agent. But some people didn't want to have that integration or utilize Microsoft Intune because that meant their mobile devices were having to reach out to the cloud and access cloud resources. And that wasn't necessarily something that they wanted. So Microsoft now has implemented on-premise mobile device management. So with this, your mobile devices don't touch Microsoft Intune in the cloud. They communicate with local resources. Now, you still have a Microsoft Intune subscription for your site infrastructure, but the mobile devices talk to local resources. So what they'll do is they'll enroll through an enrollment point and an enrollment proxy point. Once they're enrolled, they'll get policies, upload data through a management point, just like your normal Windows desktops do. When they want content, they'll go to a distribution point. Again, just like your normal Windows desktops do. So the infrastructure is very, very similar to what you already have. The only difference is that these site systems, like the management point, distribution point, are all running in SSL mode or HTTPS. So you have to either convert your existing ones over to certificate-based deployments or utilize a new DP and MP that are HTTPS-based for mobile device management. Now, one caveat you have here is that this is only for Windows 10. So currently it's not supported for iOS and Android. The product group has promised that they will provide that support going forward, but as of right now, it's still only for Windows 10 devices, phones, Surface, tablets, desktops, laptops using the OMA DM client agent. Now, once you've got those enrolled, you get inventory, which is hardware inventory, your basic stuff, as well as a list of installed applications. You can deploy settings, compliance policies, profiles, and so on out. You can deploy certificates out to your managed enrolled devices. You can deploy applications, including user-targeted MSIs. You can perform end-user initiated enrollment, or if you want to do bulk enrollment, you can do that. So what bulk enrollment is the process where the site enrolls on behalf of the user through a specific package that you create. So that's useful when you have environments such as corporate-owned devices. So I'm an employee of a company, I come in, they give me a device to use instead of me having to use my own phone or my own tablet. So they're giving me one to use while I'm an employee. So it doesn't make sense for me to have to enroll that device to get access to email and corporate resources. It should already be taken care of when I get that device. And that's what this bulk enrollment process would allow. Whereas if I want to bring my own personal phone in, then it makes sense for me to have to walk through that enrollment process. So I'm agreeing to the EULA and I understand what's going to happen to my device. So you still have user initiated or user enrollment as well as bulk enrollment. Okay, the next area to look at is operating system deployment. So there's been a lot of changes to OSD in the last releases of Configuration Manager. Let's touch on those. One area of common complaint from customers has been that of drivers. The importing process is not that great, and management of drivers once they're imported and so on. So some of the improvements that have happened, and actually driver improvements and the risky deployment and most of the stuff in OSD has actually been implemented back in the last service pack for Configuration Manager 2012. So if you're running ConfigMan 2012 Service Pack 2 or Configuration Manager 2012 R2 Service Pack 1, then you have these same features. But they were really designed for vNext or the new Configuration Manager just backported there. So first off, as you're importing drivers, the common path for all the drivers is up in the top of the dialog, so not in the actual path with the drivers. So you had to scroll over a long ways to find the actual driver name in the path. So it's easier to see that. It's easier to filter on drivers by architecture, 32-bit, 64-bit, the actual name of the driver, as well as whether the driver is signed or not. And I'll show you that momentarily in the demo. It will warn you when you try and import drivers that don't make sense for boot images. So those are things that you probably don't need to have if you're going to be importing these boot images, like audio drivers, for example. It will block you on importing drivers that are of the wrong architecture of your boot image. So trying to import a 32-bit driver into a 64-bit boot image. And you'll see those in the demo coming up. It's now also harder to deploy operating system task sequences to all clients. And this is something called risky deployment notification. You guys have all heard the horror stories where somebody went out and re-imaged the CEO's laptop, or they re-imaged their Exchange server with the Windows 7 image. Not good things. Some people call them career limiting moves or resume generating events. So the product group is trying to make it harder for you to create those. So what happens is now when you try and deploy a task sequence for OSD, as a required operating system task sequence, that's deemed to be risky or potential to be risky. And they'll pop up some notifications for you. When you have one of these risky deployments, it blocks the use of most of your built-in collections, like all systems. So you can't deploy a task sequence anymore to the all systems collection, which is goodness. It blocks or hides by default most custom collections, and those will be collections with a member count greater than an admin defined value. And the default there is 100. So any collections that you've created that have more than 100 clients or members in them would get filtered out of that list of targets for your OSD task sequence. And you can change that value to something different, as you'll see in my demo. It will warn you on deployments of collections with server-based clients or configuration manager site systems in them. You probably don't want to re-image your configuration manager site server or your management point, distribution points, and so on, not without really knowing what you're doing. There's some additional things, and you'll see that in the demo coming up here momentarily as well. Another thing that's very, very cool is Windows PE Pure Cache. So think about the scenario where you have a branch or you have a headquarters with a data center and your configuration manager infrastructure is in the data center. Then you have a branch office with, let's say, 10 clients. You're going to re-image all those clients from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So your first client gets the boot media or whatever the deployment process is, and it boots up WinPE. It needs to get the Windows 10 image. Now, Windows 10 image, the bare bones one that comes in the product in Windows 10 is about 3.5 gigabytes in size, let's say. And you may have made modifications to it, thrown more apps in there and so on, so yours might be a whole lot larger. Well, the first guy's got to go across the wire to your distribution point and download that across the wire. In traditional scenarios, all 10 of those clients would have to do that same thing. So that's a lot of traffic going across your wide area network. Well, with Windows PE Pure Cache, when you enable that as a client setting as well as in your task sequence, what will happen is that first client will go ahead and download that Windows 10 image, place it in its configuration manager client cache, and maintain that. So once it's now booted up and running, let's say the full Windows 10 operating system, clients 2 through 10 want to do the exact same thing. But instead of having clients 2 through 10 go across the WAN to the distribution point to download that, let's say 7 gigabyte image, they get it from that first client on the same subnet that already downloaded that image. So very, very cool. You're saving a lot of traffic over your WAN with the WinPE Pure Cache. And it's very cool. It doesn't require a specific operating system. So it's any configuration manager client. First guy gets it in WinPE, he downloads, caches it, as long as he's got enough cache space. And all of the clients, when they boot up on that same subnet in WinPE, they'll get redirected to that first guy who already downloaded that image. So it saves you a lot of traffic. Also support for task sequences that have multiple reboots. You've had issues in the past where you're deploying software updates to your task sequence and you have multiple software updates that require reboots, the task sequence would get lost and it would stop working. Now it remembers where it was through multiple different reboots and continues on. Support for media greater than 32 gigabytes in size. Consistency in the number of and size of your SMS TS log file, which is great for troubleshooting. In the past, the log number as well as size would change throughout the OS deployment process, and you wind up losing some good detail information that you would need for troubleshooting if things didn't go correctly. And then additional audit status messages so you know who's doing what, which you'll see momentarily. So let's go back over to our demo environment, go back into full screen mode, go to operating systems, go to drivers. I already started the driver import process. And you can see here that here's my driver path. In the past, the driver path was sitting down here, so I'd had to scroll way along off to the right to be able to find my actual drivers. So the common portion of that path is now up at the top. You have checkboxes for hiding drivers that are not in storage or network classes, which are traditional things you need for boot images. And by default, it's going to hide any drivers that are not signed. So all the drivers here in this last column should say yes because they're signed. So let me go ahead and do something like a search for a filter on VMware. And now you can see it filters out the list of just drivers that have VMW somewhere in the name, the path. So that's kind of cool. If I were to go ahead and select those drivers and click next, and this is the normal, I'm not going to add any drivers to my to any driver packages. I'll go ahead and update my boot image. It tells me I have to go ahead and update my DPs. That's cool. That's all fine. But now let's go back and let's go here and take a couple of these drivers here. You see they all happen to be 64-bit drivers. Let me go ahead and I'm not going to update package right now. And let me go to my 32-bit boot image again. And we're going to have to update DPs. Now I get this warning or this error saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't add 64-bit drivers to a 32-bit boot image. So it lets me know that and blocks me from doing something that's really dumb. So I'll go ahead and cancel out of that. Now, I've got, as you saw, those two task sequences that I created earlier. Let's go ahead and deploy this bare metal task sequence to install Windows 10. So I'm going to do a deployment. As soon as I click the Browse button for collections, this message box pops up and says that this task sequence has the potential to be a high-risk deployment. So therefore, it's going to block some collections and hide some other ones. So I understand that. I click OK. And now look at my collections. I don't have all systems. I don't have all desktop and server clients. I don't have a couple of my other custom collections. All I have is one custom collection, Windows 7 clients, and one for all unknown computers, which is built in, which makes sense because the whole purpose of that collection is for operating system deployments. But notice up above, I have this checkbox. It says hide collections with a member count greater than the site's minimum size configuration, which is 2. The default there would be 100 normally. So right here, that would normally be 100. I've changed that to a value of 2 just for my demo. So let me go ahead and clear that checkbox. And now you'll see some additional collections appear. And I get this message saying I've chosen to display additional collections. So available collections are still restricted based on maximum configuration. So now I've got some additional collections here. So let me go ahead and you see that 2 of those that got added are above 2 as far as members. Let me go ahead and take all servers, click OK. And I'm going to make this a required task sequence because that's what makes it risky. Click next. And now I get this message. I'll zoom in for you. Remember before it said that this has potential for being a high-risk deployment? It's stating that now it is a high-risk deployment. And it says it's because it's required. And I cleared that checkbox to go beyond my site's minimum 2. I have server-based clients that I'm targeting. And I have configuration manager site systems I'm targeting. So that makes this a high-risk deployment. So if I want to continue, I have to select this checkbox here, which means it's going to generate an audit status message. So people are going to know that it was Wally that did this and not Joe. So it will be logged as a status message for me, and people will, again, be able to track when Exchange server goes down or the site server is now reformatted with Windows 7 because of the fact that I did it. Now, if my task sequence had that check readiness and it was designated for a client platform, then it would filter out anyway and would not actually do the deployment on my server-based clients. But that's was not in this task sequence we're deploying. So that's kind of cool stuff that can help you out a bit and maybe even save your job. Okay, additional areas of interest. So some of those other things that are kind of cool in the product that you might not think about, but give you a lot of benefit. First off is preferred management points. This is really cool. So one of the most common reasons that you guys or any customers deploy secondary sites right now is because they want to have a management point close to that client. You can already put a distribution point out there and put it in boundary groups so clients would prefer that distribution point. But management points in the past have been random selection. Anyone that's available to me, I'm going to go ahead and use it even if it's across a wide area network. So you put a secondary site out there so that clients in that boundary of that secondary site would utilize the management point at that secondary site. Well, that's a lot of extra overhead on the wire and infrastructure just to have a secondary site out there. So now you can designate that clients will go ahead and use the management points that are in their boundary groups. So I'll show you what that looks like. Microsoft Azure support. So with the current version of the product, there's a couple of very limited support cases for Azure, like having config manager on premise, but it's allowed to manage clients that are running in Azure, or having your site environment up in Azure on a single box, but it can only manage Azure-based clients, so no on-premise clients. So you're kind of limited. So in this scenario now with the new configuration manager product, you could have your site infrastructure split. So part of your infrastructure on-premise, part of it up in Azure, one site in Azure, another child site in on-premise or vice versa, one site managing clients in both Azure and on-premise and so on. So very cool. And you'll also be a designation of when a client is Azure-based versus a on-premise client. And I'll show you what that looks like. Another very common complaint from people in the past has been the fact that it was really confusing for their end users to know whether to go to Software Center or go to the application catalog to get software. If the software was targeted to their computer, they'd go to Software Center. If the software was targeted to them as a user, they would go to Application Catalog. But even if they went to the Application Catalog, they might have to go to Software Center to track status of their deployment or set some additional options. So it was rather confusing. So now the product group has combined Software Center and Application Catalog into a single utility. And very cool. It's there for most scenarios. You still have to utilize the real Application Catalog website. If your deployments the application requires admin approval, that's not been implemented in that combined Software Center and Application Catalog. Or if you want to select that checkbox that lets you set the user device affinity for the user to say, this is my primary computer. Those couple things you do still have to go to the Application Catalog for. Other than that, use the new Software Center. Site and hierarchy scale improvements, not going to affect the vast majority of customers in the world, but kind of cool. The primary site can now go up to 175,000 clients, which covers the way vast majority of customers out there. Now, Microsoft's more than 175,000, and I know a number of other customers beyond that. Hierarchy up to 700,000, that means a single site infrastructure with the CAS and multiple primary sites can now go up to 700,000 clients. And that will handle just about everybody, including Microsoft. So that's very cool. Multiple deployments for an automatic deployment rule. So in the past, you would create an ADR, it would create its software update group and package and create the deployment for a single collection. Well, you guys have deployments that you go to your pilot clients, your production clients, your pilot servers, your production servers. They get updated on Mondays and then a different group for Wednesdays, different group on Sundays. And it was hard to do that in the past. Now an ADR can have multiple different deployments on it, each targeting different collections with different scheduling options on it. So very cool. Ability to initiate the WSUS cleanup cycle. So now you can have WSUS cleanup initiating on demand as opposed to waiting for the automated cycle. And something that all you guys are probably doing already, just wasn't really supported, was you guys are using task sequences to do things like deploy applications, deploy software updates, stuff outside of OSD. And that was never supported by the product group. Now it is. So there's product documentation up on TechNet that lists all of the task sequence actions that are supported outside of OSD. And I got a teaser for a few things that'll be coming in the future, just to keep you excited about the product. So the ability of managing Office 365 desktop client updates, that's actually in the product already. It's just that the Office 365 team hasn't released any updates that are consumable by Config Manager. But when they do, which they're working on right now, and I think they've just released their first test release of those, is that the normal software update workflow that you're familiar with the software update point, WSUS, scanning and catalogs and so on, will still work for Office 365. It's just that now the config man environment will go download the Office 365 updates from a specific location, download them, and then give them or hand them off to the Office client, Office 365 desktop client, and it will go ahead and do the actual updating of the clients, of the Office 365 application updates. Cluster-aware patch support. So this one, as well as the SQL Server always-on availability group support, those were in the technical previews prior to the RTM. They weren't ready for prime time, so the product group removed them from the 15.11 build that I'm showing you. But they're back in some of the new technical previews, so eventually they'll get added back into the get added to the RTM of the product or a future update. So cluster-aware patch support lets you designate a collection of clients to be managed as a cluster, and then controlling what percentage of those clients can be taken offline for patching at that point in time. And hopefully in some point in the future, you'll be able to order the specific order of those clients that you want to be patched. You also have the ability of designating a node drain script for shutting down the systems and a node resume script to start things back up after patching and restarting those computers. And then support for SQL Server always-on availability groups, which the rest of System Center's had for quite a while and Config Man never has. Again, that's not in the product today. It's in the previews, and hopefully it'll get back in the product at some point in time, or not back into, it'll get into the RTM or full product. Let me go and show you a couple of those things. So if we go back here, if I go to administration, go to my sites, go to hierarchy settings. On the general tab is this checkbox. Clients prefer to use management points specified in boundary groups. So I select the checkbox. I then go to my boundary groups. I go to the appropriate boundary group for that secondary site location or that remote location. Go to its properties, go to the references tab. I then go ahead and just make sure that I put my management points in that same boundary group along with the distribution points and state migration points, whatever I happen to have there. So very, very simple. And what will happen then is when the clients get their MP list, it will go ahead and the preferred MPs will rise to the top of that MP list and the clients will try them first. And if it can communicate with one of those preferred MPs, it'll go ahead and use it. If it can't, it will fall back to a non-preferred MP because it's more important for you that your client's managed, even if it has to talk across the WAN for a period of time, as opposed to not being managed just to save the network traffic. So that's very useful. Let me go ahead and bring up Software Center, the new Software Center. I think I have it here, yep. So this is the new Software Center. I don't have anything deployed in this example, but you just see the new look and feel. You can brand it. And if you actually do have a Microsoft Intune extension, you can actually put a company logo here along with the branding. But it's just got a newer look and feel for user-targeted and system-targeted applications, whether it's apps, packages, operating systems, software updates, and so on. They'll all appear here in this new look and feel for the, it's still called Software Center. And you can still go in there and connect to the application catalog if you need to for, again, application approvals, as well as setting the UDA device. A couple other things for you real quick. If we go look at a device, and I don't have an Azure environment here, but if I were to go to properties from my client, down here for virtual machine type, and I'll zoom in for you, it says Hyper-V in my case, because it is a virtual machine. If this was in Azure, it would say Microsoft Azure here. So I would know, and I could create collections of all my Azure-based clients and manage them differently than I'm doing with my on-premise clients. So that's useful. Now, again, this is the release product, so I can't show you the cluster-aware patching support, but what you would do is go to a collection like all servers, go to properties, and then in all this white space right here in the technical previews, if you're looking at that, you would have a checkbox right here. Select the checkbox and you have a button that says settings over here. So select the checkbox that says all these computers are a cluster. Click the settings button, and on the next screen it would pop up. It would let you designate the percentage of clients that can go down at a time, and then the node drain and node resume scripts that are available for maintaining your patches and clustering scenarios. So that's very worthwhile stuff. So, all right, let's go out and finish this guy off. So just a quick overview on how to get there. I'm not going to delve on this at any point for any length of time because of the fact that this is the topic of Thursday's webinar. But just to give you a teaser, there is in-place upgrade support from ConfigMan 2012 SP1 and SP2 and ConfigMan 2012 R2 and R2 SP1, which is everything for ConfigMan 2012 except for the RTM release. You can do an in-place upgrade. So you don't have to do a side-by-side migration like you had to do from ConfigMan 2007 to ConfigMan 2012. Now, if you're a ConfigMan 2007 customer, you absolutely have to perform a migration, so side-by-side migration, but you can go directly from ConfigMan 2007 Service Pack 2 to ConfigMan vNext or current branch 1511, whatever you want to call it. You can also migrate from ConfigMan 2012 Service Pack 2 and R2 SP1 to the current product if you want to do a side-by-side migration instead of an in-place upgrade. That is a definite possibility if you want to. Now, just be aware of the fact that Configuration Manager now requires the Windows 10 ADK in order to install/upgrade. So a quick summary for you, and then I got the next step slide. System Center Configuration Manager is the newest release, and that's the name of the product. It will be updated automatically without cumulative updates or service packs. Now, the automatically is in quotes because you still get to control when or if you install any specific updates. Those update packs are cumulative, so if you skip one, the next one will have everything that was in the one that you skipped. And the product group is stating approximately every 3 to 4 months, so quarterly or a little bit longer, they'll come out with new update packs. They're already working on one for the RTM of the product, so it should be out soon. So in the next month or so, you should see your first update. It has full Windows 10 support, all the client features, use of Windows Defender, OSD support, including in-place upgrade, and then the Windows 10 servicing plans and rings, as well as the ability of supporting Windows 10 as a mobile device if you want to, through the either Microsoft Intune or the on-premise MDM solution. Lots of OSD upgrades, updates to help save your job in that risky deployment verification and driver import and some other cool things there, WinPE Pure Cache. And it's easy to upgrade to or migrate to depending on where you're coming from. Now, what's next? Again, this Thursday, so just in a couple of days, is the webinar I'm doing on upgrading to or moving to, since it does include migration as well, but upgrading to System Center Configuration Manager. Now, I did a webinar a year ago on upgrading to ConfigMan 2012 R2. And even while that's a valid webinar and the steps are pretty much the same, there are a few new things I've added in this webinar. So I'd highly recommend that you attend this webinar on Thursday to get the new information. Such I'll talk about some of the new operating system requirements and a couple new things for prep and some gotchas that we've seen. Also look for some new Configuration Manager apps from Cybersyn soon. So we're working on some new apps there, and we hope to have some new stuff coming out shortly for you. And we're going to have a new version of the very popular Remote Manage app. So if you're utilizing a Remote Manage app, we'll have a new version of it coming out. Can't give you a time frame on it, but we do have plans for an update of it, so it'll be coming out. So if you're not familiar with it yet, you might want to check that webinar out and start playing around with it, get familiar with it, and then be ready for the new version when it comes out. And then if you need any help with your deployment or migration or upgrade for System Center Configuration Manager, you can contact us at the information at the bottom of the screen, the website, or team@cybersyn.com email, and we can help engage you with our consulting team or one of our partners if you need help with the partner scenario. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming and attending the webinar. Hopefully you found it beneficial, worthwhile, and learned something about the new version of Configuration Manager that just got released a little over a month ago, so about 2 months ago. I would absolutely be going to it as soon as I could if it was my environment. A lot of cool things in there. I love the updates and servicing feature. It's not really that beneficial right now since there aren't any updates, but there will be very, very shortly. But I have played around with it in the technical preview build, and I really like the way it works and the ease of upgrade process that it provides to me. Plus, as part of that is that client piloting, pre-production client testing mode, which is very, very cool. So that's very beneficial, and I think you'll really enjoy that. If you're doing Windows 10 deployments, then obviously the in-place upgrade and the Windows 10 servicing plans and rings management is very cool. Preferred management points, great way to get you to help remove some of those secondary sites and make things easier on your infrastructure. It's a lot of coolness here. I'd highly recommend getting to it as soon as you can, provided you have the appropriate licenses for it. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this webinar up, and we'll check out the Q&A area, but we'll go ahead and close out the recording, and then we'll see you guys on Thursday for our next webinar, which is on moving to System Center Configuration Manager. Thanks for attending. We'll see you all then. Thanks, and bye.